All right. These are my flashcards. This is the front, and this is the back. All right. Domestic violence has always been a controversial issue in the United States. Many people nowadays cannot seem to find the courage to press charges against their abuser for some reason or another. In most cases, they're not even able to come out and speak about the situation because they're scared of what their peers may think, or even what the abuser might do to them if they do speak out. The abuser should always be arrested against the victim's wishes because of all the damage they have caused the victim. Most people associate domestic abuse with women being the victim. However, men can also be the victim of domestic abuse. An immense amount of people experience domestic abuse on a daily basis. The mental distress that these victims come to live with on a day-to-day basis often affects them for the rest of their lives, even if they have left the abusive relationship. The damage done to one's self-image and one's self-confidence leads to a multitude of social issues and can lead to several mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, and PTSD, and many other mental illnesses such as eating disorders. According to the Loss of Agency article titled How Domestic Violence Impacts Mental Health, on average, more than half of the women seen in mental health settings are being or have been abused by an intimate partner. They also continue to say, these are specific diagnoses that are only common experienced by these women, which are PTSD, depression, and anxiety. This shows really how many women suffer from domestic violence on a daily basis and how much it affects them. Most victims are consumed by fear and are too afraid to leave their abuser for various reasons. Some of them being threats to the victim, threats to the victim's family or friends, or even fear of what would happen to their children. Often, the victim is too afraid about social judgment and fear of the abuser to speak out about what they're experiencing and they're too afraid to get help. In more serious cases, the abuser is not only physically abusing the victim, but he or she is also mentally abusing the victim. They drive wedges between the victim and their loved ones, making them feel isolated, as if they have no one to turn to. They give ultimatums to the victim, who at some point probably really loved the abuser, and it causes the victim to make excuses for the abuser's behavior. Sometimes, the victim can also feel ashamed and embarrassed of what is happening to them In an article titled A Lesson on Why Most Sexual Assault Victims Stay Silent by author Sydney Carlos, she states, this feeling of being responsible of what happened and what some women to not speak up sooner. When people feel ashamed, they hide. This feeling that may experience tends to isolate these victims from people that care for them. Another large issue is the fact that sometimes victims build up a kind of Stockholm syndrome, where they tell themselves that what the abuser is doing is okay. Some victims are so blind to the fact that what their partner is doing is wrong, that they don't realize that they need help in these situations. People with this syndrome hardly ever even realize that anything is wrong. They begin to think that they have different things in common with the abuser. They may also start thinking wrong of the people that are trying to help them, like the authorities. When any victim starts thinking that what they're dealing with is normal, they're less likely to report the abuser to the authorities. In an article titled, What is Stockholm Syndrome and Who Does It Affect by Kimberly Holland, She states an example of this. In 1998, 10-year-old Natasha was kidnapped and kept underground in the dark in an insulated room. Her kidnapper, Wolfgang, held her captive for more than 8 years. During that time, he showed her a little bit of kindness, but he also threatened to kill her, and he beat her and almost starved her to death. Natasha was able to escape, and later Wolfgang committed suicide. News accounts at the time report Natasha wept inconsolably. This shows an extreme case of Stockholm Syndrome, because even though she was beaten by him, after he died, she cried hysterically. Healing can be a difficult and long process, especially when abuse has lasted a great amount of time. After a person is able to get out of such a domestic cycle and domestic situation, it should be their priority to get medical help. For example, they can go to counseling or even therapy. Healing is extremely important. It will make the victim feel more in control of their own life, and it can also help the victim feel free from that pain and depression that abuse caused them. Victims also need to realize that every survivor has their own journey, and not everyone recovers at the same pace. Therapy can take anywhere from a few weeks to several years, and this can be really a hard thing for them to realize. After therapy, it is not all over. Victims also will suffer the effects of abuse in their future relationships. These effects are a person experiences after a difficult situation is called trauma. Trauma can occur when someone is hurt by another person. After this trauma occurs, the victim is less likely to trust anybody who she will be in a relationship with next, because they have that mindset that that person will hurt them too. In an article by the Center of Addiction and Mental Health titled Recognizing the Effects of Abuse-Related Trauma, the author states, sexual abuse can affect women's sexuality. A woman may confuse love and care, and this is because the abuser gave them the attention that they wanted and showed them love through sex. Some victims have also avoided sexual contact in general because this reminds them of what happened in their past. Victims who have been in an abusive relationship for a short period of time are most likely to leave their relationship before it's too late. On the other hand, victims in long-term relationships get used to it and start thinking it is normal. This happens more than anyone can imagine. There are thousands of people on a daily basis calling hotlines because they're suffering from abuse. These numbers will continue rising on a daily basis if we don't put a limelight to it. The article, Facts and Statistics about the Domestic Violence, shows, on average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. All things considered, it is important for all abusers to be arrested against the victim's wishes. In those moments, the victims are too weak to think for themselves and make the right decision for their own good, because in most cases, they are blinded by the love they think they feel for the abuser. Arresting the abuser will also decrease the number of cases of abuse on a daily basis. Please, if you are experiencing any type of abuse, do not be afraid to leave, and do not hesitate to dial 1-800-799-7233, or you can also visit them online at thehotline.org. Thank you.